drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. Dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. Find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. People run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Mad world. It's a mad world. Children waiting for the day they feel good. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Made to feel the way that every child should. Sit and listen, sit and listen. Went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. Hello teacher, tell me what's my lesson? Look right through me, look right through me. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. Dreams in which I'm dying are the best I ever had. Find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. People run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. It's a mad world. It's a mad world. Mad world.
Welcome, and I invite you to rise and by your spirit, sing hymn number 361. Enter, rejoice, amen.
This is for Liz. In the words of Rumi, come, come, whoever you are. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears, you are welcome here. No matter where you've been, no matter where you're going, you are welcome here. No matter what body brought you in the door, no matter who you love, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, or some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. If you come here with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, you are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. And if you want to turn off your electronic devices, that would be good. And there's a chapel back there. You're invited to go hang out in if you want a little moment of solace. And you can write your joys and concerns there. I'm going to say thingy. That's an in-joke. Children are always welcome in the sanctuary at all times, but we also have a nursery downstairs and a closed circuit TV that'll show you the broadcast if you want to take them down there. And after the service, everybody's invited to go downstairs and enjoy each other's company and have snacks and greet one another. And please look at the order of service so you can see all of your announcements. And let us know if there's anything we can do for you. And I just want to say again, welcome.
Let me add my welcome and good morning. I'm Reverend Bob LaVallee. I've been traveling a lot. I got one more trip to make next weekend, and I really, really miss y'all when I'm not here. So it's good to be back in the pulpit. And it's great to see so many folks out here after a really fabulous big event last night. And there was a roast, which is what Judith was mentioning, referring to. So there was some mockery happening. There was a visit from Melania Trump, believe it or not. Just check with someone who was there to hear about that. We want to recognize the end of the Utah State Legislative season. Another year done. And I want to acknowledge the good work of the advocates who showed up for that, including folks in this congregation. There were a lot of good things that came out of this, advances in protections for air quality. Utah improved its hate crimes bill. And there were other things that happened that were positive. They resisted a couple of really terrible transphobic laws. And I'm really pleased that for all the folks, including folks from this congregation who did that work to make sure that didn't happen. And as always, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things that we need to improve on. And one in particular that I was really disappointed about, which is that there was no ban on conversion therapy. And I understand the complexity of it and the need to give flexibility to therapists to work in the way they want to work. But let's make it plain. Conversion therapy is torture, and it's completely unacceptable. That fight is not over. So, I also want to say our hearts are breaking over the events in New Zealand. Just a horrible thing, and people in this congregation are personally affected. My heart is breaking with them too. And we're going to send a message of solidarity and love to the Muslim Community Center that's over on the other side of Fort Union. And so there's a poster out front. Oh, wait, Liz is holding it. We're going to have folks, we love our Muslim neighbors, we do. And I would like everyone to sign that, and I'm going to bring it over there after service is done today, along with some flowers, as an expression of that we are religious communities in alignment. And just as we stood with our Jewish brethren back when Pittsburgh happened, and we lit candles at Kol Ami, I was right there standing next to Rabbi Sam. We're going to stand with our brothers and sisters and siblings in the Muslim community here in Salt Lake City. So it's a hard thing, but this is the power of religious community. I want to read a longish poem by Naomi Shihab Nye. I think it takes us from that place to the place where we need to go today. It's called Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how how desolate the landscape can be between regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop, the passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. How he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow, you must speak to it until your voice catches the thread of all the sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. It is only then that kindness makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for." And that goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. It was Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye. In that spirit, come, let us celebrate together. I invite you to rise and body your spirit for hymn number 168, One More Step.
asked to speak today because last week an article entitled "After L, G, and B" was published in UU World Magazine. The article was a personal essay about the author's experiences as a cisgender straight person adapting to the increasing visibility of trans people in her life. The critical reaction from trans and non-binary Unitarian Universalists, particularly religious professionals, was swift. Many trans and non-binary UUs were deeply hurt by this article. The editor of UU World issued an apology, and so did the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I am a queer, trans, Unitarian Universalist. I was not hurt by reading this article. I thought that the article was well-intentioned, but that it showed a lack of understanding on the part of the author. The most fundamental mistake made by UU World was to center one of the magazine's first major articles about trans people on the experiences of a cisgender person and her discomfort around trans people. In effect, an article on the topic of the marginalization of trans people itself further marginalized trans people. With that said, I found this article more accurate and sensitive than most articles that I have read that were written by cisgender straight people about trans or non-binary people. But better than most is a low bar when it comes to media coverage of trans and non-binary people. I hope that Unitarian Universalists use this controversy as a catalyst for growth. The Transforming Hearts Collective offered a list of tips for allies talking about the UU World article. I'd like to share those tips with you. Believe trans people. Listen more than you talk. Be willing to remain in discomfort. Have hard conversations with love. Value relationships over perfectionism. Don't expect every trans person to want to educate you, but honor, right? Okay, well, this is the next part. But honor those who do. Stay in your heart rather than in your head. Don't ask a trans person anything you wouldn't ask a cis person. Comfort those who are hurting and build awareness with other cis people. Uplift trans voices. I'm proud to be part of a community of people who are having these conversations. A community of flawed people who own up to their shortcomings and take steps to correct them. I'm proud to be in community with other trans and non-binary people. And I'm proud to be in community with cisgender people who listen to trans and non-binary people. So let me tell you why I'm here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. I'm here because I grew up driving past that giant rainbow flag outside. I'm also here because this congregation was the first in the Unitarian Universalist Association to hire an out transgender minister, Reverend Sean Parker Denson. I'm here because I'm an atheist, but I yearned for a multi-generational community of people with shared values, like the churches I had grown up in. I'm here because at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society, I can be a part of that community without sacrificing my integrity as an atheist and without feeling like I need to hide who I am. I'm here because I believe that the Our Whole Lives Sexuality Education Program empowers people of all ages to make informed, wise, and values-based decisions. I'm here because Reverend Patty married my partner and I on this stage. I'm here because recently, when I was pregnant, people here were happy for me, made me feel welcome, and didn't misgender me. I'm here because when I've breastfed my baby in the nursery downstairs, the other people in the nursery treat me with respect. My partner Rick and I are here because this is the community that we want our daughter to grow up in.
on another story written by one of my favorite authors, Leo Tolstoy, who's a Russian author. So you'll notice that some of the names in here are also the names of Russian authors, if you're a Russian literature nerd like I am. Once there was a boy named Nikolai who sometimes felt uncertain about the right way to act. Do you ever feel uncertain about the right way to act? I do. I want to be a good person, he told his friends, but I don't always know the right way to do that. Nikolai's friends understood and they wanted to help him. If only I could find the answers to my 3 questions, Nikolai continued, then I would always know what to do. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? What is the right thing to do? Nikolai's friends considered his first question. Then Sonia the heron spoke. To know the best time to do things, one must plan in advance, she said. Gogol, the monkey, who had been rooting through some leaves to find something good to eat, said, you will know when to do things if you watch and pay close attention. Then Pushkin, the dog, who was just dozing off, rolled over and sat. You can't pay attention to everything yourself. You need a pack to help keep watch and help you decide when to do things. For example, Gogol, a coconut is about to fall on your head. Nikolai thought for a moment. Then he asked a second question. Who is the most important one? Those who are closest to heaven, said Sonia, circling up into the sky. Those who know how to heal the sick, said Gogol, stroking his bruised noggin. He didn't miss that coconut, did he? Those who make the rules, growled Pushkin. Nikolai thought some more. Then he asked the third question. What is the right thing to do? Flying, said Sonia. Having fun all the time, laughed Gogol. Fighting, barked Pushkin, right away. Then the boy thought for a long while. He loved his friends, and he knew they were all trying their best to help him answer his questions. But their answers didn't seem quite right. Then an idea came to him. I know, he thought. I will ask Leo the turtle. He has lived a very long time. Surely he will know the answers I am looking for. Nikolai hiked high up into the mountains, where the old turtle lived all alone. When Nikolai arrived, he found Leo digging a garden. The turtle was old, and digging was really hard for him. I have 3 questions, and I came to ask your help, Nikolai said. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? Yes, I have soft leggings. Sometimes I just can't keep it together up here. Okay, Brooklyn, please don't touch my legs without my consent. Leo listened carefully, but he only smiled. Then he went on with his digging. You must be tired, Nikolai said at last. Let me help you. The turtle gave him his shovel and thanked him. And because it was easier for a young boy to dig than it was an old turtle, Nikolai kept digging until all the rows were finished. And just as he finished, the wind blew wildly and rain burst from the darkened clouds. As they moved towards the cottage for shelter, Nikolai suddenly heard a cry for help. Running down the path, he found a panda whose leg had been injured by a fallen tree. Carefully, Nikolai carried her into Leo's house and made a splint for her leg with a stick of bamboo. The storm raged on, banging at the doors and windows. The panda finally woke up. Where am I, she said, and where is my baby? The boy ran out of the cottage and down the path. The roar of the storm was deafening, but pushing against the howling wind and drenching rain, he ran further into the forest. There he found the panda's child, cold and shivering on the ground. The little panda was wet and scared, but alive. Nikolai carried her inside and made her warm and dry, and and laid her in her mother's arms. Leo smiled when he saw what the boy had done, Leo the turtle. The next morning, the sun was warm, birds sang, and all was well with the world. The panda's leg was healing nicely, and she thanked Nikolai for saving her and her baby from the storm. At that moment, Sonia, Gogol, and Pushkin arrived to make sure everyone was all right. Nikolai felt great peace within himself. He had wonderful friends, and he had saved the panda and her child. But he also felt disappointed. He still had not found the answers to his 3 questions. So he asked Leo the turtle one more time. The old turtle looked at the boy. "But your questions have been answered," he said. "They have?" said the boy. "Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig my garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cries for help in the storm. Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging in the garden. The most important one at that moment was me, and the most important thing to do was help me with my garden. Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time you spent mending her leg and saving her baby. The most important ones were the panda and her child. And the most important thing to do was to take care of them and make them safe. Remember, then, that there is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is always the one you're with. And the most important thing to do is good for the one who is standing at your side. For these, my dear boy, are the answers to what is most important in you." I invite you all to come downstairs for religious exploration.
Please join me for a moment when we bring our highest intentions to the fore. Regardless of what we believe, prayer helps us bring our focus to our deepest hopes and worries. Through prayer, we name our intentions, which in turn helps us to better live out those intentions. We lift up all those who are coping with illness, be it physical or mental, spiritual or emotional. May they find comfort and healing. We lift up Sherry Lunn's father, who entered hospice this week. May he and the entire Lunn family find comfort. And we lift up Bonnie Kaufman and Peggy Reiner as they recover, and Adeline Poloboy, who is also in hospice. May they know our hearts are with them. We lift up those who are struggling to find work or financial security, who are struggling with housing insecurity. May they know that their value transcends mere dollars and cents. We remember all those who are forced to flee their homes to find safety from climate change, or in order to simply live with security and dignity. May all refugees find shelter. We remember the victims of the horrific shooting at the 2 mosques in New Zealand. May light perpetual shine upon them, and may love, not hate, triumph in our hearts and in the world. those times that we fail to live into our best selves, and we seek to understand those who have hurt us. We forgive ourselves, we forgive each other, and we begin again in love. We give thanks for this congregation. May we find comfort and growth as we strive together as Unitarian Universalists. For these prayers, the prayers held in our hearts unspoken, we bring our best energy. May they be so, and may we all be held in the heart of love. Amen. And blessed be.
It is our practice here at South Valley to split our worship service offerings with a charitable organization or program that aligns with our values and principles. For March and April, it will go to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center of Northern Utah, who is dedicated to the care and rehabilitation of wildlife with the goal of releasing them into their natural habitats. They served more than 2,500 birds and small mammals in 2018. They provide wildlife and environmental education programs to our larger community here in Utah. Will you join me in saying the words for our offering, if you need to read them there in the order of service? We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share in the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts.
I volunteered to pop this time. Every once in a while I'll put a song out there that is sort of at the edge of my abilities, really. This one in particular takes a fine line between the right amount of caffeination and not quite there yet. So, birds singing in the day, night, take these broken wings and long fly all your life. You were all waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbirds singing in the day, night, take these sunken eyes and love see all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark night. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark night. Blackbird singing in the day of night. Take these broken wings and long fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arrive. You were only waiting for this moment to arrive.
The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center of Northern Utah thanks you for your gifts and blessings on these gifts and the givers. I invite you now to participate in a responsive reading for 468 in our grade room. And I'll offer my usual caveat about responsive readings, which I'm always a little reluctant to put words in people's mouths, so consider it an exploration of the poetry and not necessarily swearing us all about. It's a disclaimer you only hear at a union church, right? Words of George Odell, we need one another. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we are in despair. in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again.
We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of peace, when we encourage and endure and stand again.
We need one another when we come to die, and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
Words of George Odell, S&B. About 10 years ago, my friend Marta's house in Boston, Massachusetts, burned down on Christmas Eve. Fire happened at night while she and her mother and her teenage daughter were sleeping. Smoke alarms worked, thank heavens, but they barely had time to grab their coats and get everyone outside. And then they watched in shock as everything they owned went up in smoke. Everything they owned became ash. And I asked Marta what she wished folks understood about her situation after the fire. She talked about how incredibly damaging it can be to one's mental health. She talked about how overwhelming it is to deal with insurance companies. It was so hard for her to help her teenage daughter deal with the loss while coping with her own feelings at the same time. Everything was upended. Since then, the holidays are always mixed for her. She has many happy memories, and also a lingering trauma. Mostly she thinks about how lucky she was that she got her whole family out safely, and she's so grateful for that. And above all, she feels more vulnerable now that she's learned how quickly, how easily a life can be destabilized. She feels vulnerable. You know, a disaster is a moment when irresistible forces, destructive forces, hit us in ways that can't be controlled. Those forces may have been out there all along, like a storm in the middle of the ocean, but they only become a disaster when they hammer our vulnerable lives. It's this mismatch between the storm's force and our puny protection that causes the disaster. The fact is, we're always walking around vulnerable. We're always a disaster waiting to happen. One April morning in 1906, a middle-aged woman named Anne Holshauser was shaken out of bed by an earthquake in San Francisco. 1906. Her house was destroyed, so she salvaged what she could, and she walked with thousands of other people to Golden Gate Park. And after 3 days there, she stitched together blankets and rugs. She was a seamstress, and stitched together blankets and rugs, and she created a tent that housed 22 people, including 13 children. And starting with just one pie plate and one tin cup, she began cooking meals for others. Other survivors gave her money, and she walked to Oakland to buy cooking utensils. Eventually, she and others were serving hundreds of meals a day. Her friends put up a sign calling the soup kitchen the Palace Hotel. The actual Palace Hotel in San Francisco had burnt down in the earthquake. And she wasn't alone. All over the shattered city, average folks set aside the old order of individualism and competition and, to put it simply, took care of each other. On the other hand, the established authorities in San Francisco did not behave so well. Eventually, there were 17,000 soldiers patrolling the city, and they saw mobs of looters where they were just folks trying to find food for their families. The notorious shoot-to-kill order was given, and as a consequence, people acting to help each other were sometimes murdered by the so-called keepers of the peace. The fear of the establishment was not that people would starve, but that the old order would be upended, and that people would take their fates into their own hands. And that might include taking back what was rightfully theirs from the class that was exploiting them. So remember, 1906 was near the end of what was called the Gilded Age. This is a time when the technological advancements caused an economic boom. But that economic boom only served a very small slice of the population. Immigrants were treated horribly, and corruption was so common that it was called the era of good stealings. Does that sound familiar? So all of this and much more is described in a wonderful book by one of my favorites, Rebecca Solnit. The book is called A Paradise Built in Hell: The Extraordinary Communities That Arise in Disaster. So the conventional belief is that in an emergency, regular folks are somehow transformed into an irrational, angry mob. And in this book, Solnit describes the amazing ways in which the opposite is true. So if anyone was near New York City on 9/11 or around 9/11, or in the Halifax, Nova Scotia explosion of 1917, or the Mexico City earthquake in 1985, or Katrina in New Orleans in 2005. I think we had young folks who went to help New Orleans recover, right? In all these places where there was a crisis, people stepped outside of their normal social circles to care for each other. Now, Naomi Klein wrote a book called Shock Doctrine: The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. And the basic thesis of the book is that there's a pattern of corporations taking advantage of a cataclysmic event to seize control of markets. And a good example would be the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Following the storm and the flooding, public schools and hospitals ceased to exist, and they were replaced by for-profit entities that extracted money from the community, and they're much less accountable. So sometimes an obvious disaster is followed by a quiet one. So for 3 months at the end of 2017, I was awaiting the start of a chaplain residency in Buffalo, and I got a temp job, and I spent my days on the phone in the Small Business Administration Disaster Loan Customer Service Call Center. So this is where folks who are victims of disasters call in for advice about how to get assistance from the government to rebuild their homes and businesses. They offer loans and grants. And to refresh your memory, 2017 was an awful year for a lot of folks. There was Hurricane Harvey in Texas, and Hurricane Irma in Florida, and worst of all, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico and the surrounding islands. And then there were the California wildfires that fall, remember that? And in those, a dozen people died and thousands of homes were destroyed. It was an unbelievable 6 months in the life of this country. So I'd never worked in a call center before. I've done a lot of random jobs. If you know me, you know that's true. But this was a first. So the call center, I gotta say, it's an amazing place. Like it was a huge room, like the floor of an office building. There were at least 150 cubicles. Everybody's working in teams. Everybody's wearing headsets. And the thing that is amazing about a call center is the level of scrutiny. So everything is driven by metrics. So giant signs hang from the ceiling telling everyone how many callers are waiting on hold and how long they've been waiting. So when I started there in September, the average wait time was an hour. There's just so many people trying to get help and people frantically answering their calls. So in my cubicle on my phone, there were 5 main buttons. So everyone's controlled by the phone. So 5 buttons. First is call in, which put me in the queue to receive calls from the outside. So when this button is pushed, as soon as I finish a call and I hang up, I have 50 seconds to update my database before the next call rings on the line. 50 seconds. So that's calling. That's how I spend most of my days. If I need to, I can push a button called after call, which puts my phone in pause while I finish updating the database from the last call. And I had to be careful not to push that button too much, or I'd hear about it from my supervisor. And then there was a meeting button, so I pushed that when we had team meetings, and that happened once or twice a week. There's an admin button for when I need to go talk to my supervisor, ask a question, or get something off the printer or the like. And then there's a break button for me time. And during my 9 to 11 hour work days, I'd get 30 minutes for lunch and 2 15-minute breaks. And if I went over that 15 minutes, when I got back to my cube, my boss would be waiting there. So through these buttons, my boss, who was a decent guy, he was trying to get a lot of work done. My boss monitored every second of my day and everybody else on our team's day. And every day my teammates, at the end of the day, we got a spreadsheet of our previous day's time spent in each category with our rankings. So I was always comfortably in the middle, and I tried to keep it there. But if I spent too much time in admin or in after call, I'd have to go have a conversation with my boss. So, anybody here work at a call center, just out of curiosity? Oh, you've known suffering. We should talk later. So, the monitoring didn't end there. So the boss actually listened in on our calls, and he'd even send a text message to my computer in the middle of a call. Just like a text would pop up saying, "Hey, tell the caller this or that." And it was really unnerving at first. I was like, "Oh my God!" Start stuttering. So call centers are all about control. The managers are presented with the ability to monitor the behavior of their employees in a way that no other industry can. And what can be measured becomes what is important. What can be measured becomes what is important. And what can't be measured is disregarded, or at least diminished. So the one thing you can't put a number on is stress. So I was never called into meetings with my boss to talk about my stress level. So the hard thing from the get-go was the juxtaposition of this sterile clinical management style, the setting of it, with the heartbreak that I was hearing over the phone. Men would tell me about the destruction of their businesses, and they'd sort of keep it together for a minute, and then they would weep. And women would cry into the phone while I could hear a child fussing in their lap. And I would listen with my heart breaking. And I'd also be watching the call timer on the phone, knowing that if I went over the call center goal of 6 minutes, I would hear about it. So remember when I talked about moral injury a while back? There was this constant dose, small, slow drip of moral injury, having to rush through something that should not have been rushed through. And I also learned quite a bit about how we as a country think about poverty. So after the initial assistance of keeping people safe and sanitary during the storm, like what happens in a week or two immediately afterwards, the federal government provides 2 kinds of recovery assistance. So for the very poor, and by very poor I mean the elderly, disabled with no prospects of employment, for those folks, there are outright grants to rebuild people's homes. For everyone else, there's a very low interest loan. But yes, it's a loan that has to be paid back. And several times, I had the conversation with folks when I explained how the grants, not the loans, were for desperately poor folks, and the loans were for folks who had means. I remember one woman saying to me, "So I get punished for having my act together while some jackass gets a free handout?" So I bit my tongue. I nearly bit my tongue off. And this confirmed for me what I kind of already knew, that the real disaster is our economy, how we're doing capitalism these days. I had thousands of conversations with folks who were trying to rebuild their lives, and they confirmed for me that the floods and the fires and the windstorms just topple people who are already teetering. I talked to so many folks who, before the disasters, had constructed safety nets made of spider webs, who were just barely hanging on from month to month. And I talk to people in that situation now, right here. The system simply is not working, and people in this congregation are suffering because of that. Or rather, maybe you could say the system is working fine for the 10% and not for anybody else. So people who work full-time should be able to afford housing and should have security in a disaster. I spoke to a man who had been working and he was living in a car with his kids. That ain't right. So yes, a call center is about control, and disasters remind us that control is an illusion. And I don't know this for sure, but I bet that everyone in this sanctuary has had the rug pulled out from them, or more to the point, everyone in the sanctuary at some point or other has met that irresistible destructive force that hits us in ways that can't be controlled. It's a part of living. And perhaps this knowledge of our vulnerability is what drives us to go to such great lengths to create a sense of control. Well, we can't prevent disasters from happening, but we can prepare. And it's funny, when I was where I worked in the call center, I read all these government disaster preparation pamphlets, and they're really heavy on advice like having the right gear ahead of time, just a decent idea, buy a week's worth of groceries that won't perish, have extra batteries, keep some cash around the house, But they never said a word about looking out for your neighbors or asking for help, asking for their help. So let's remember what Rebecca Solnit reminds us in her book. In disasters, people mostly respond by being amazing to each other. So our best preparation, the closest thing to being in control, is having good neighbors. And we have good neighbors by being good neighbors. We have good neighbors by being good neighbors. That's a plan ahead thing too. Before we need to ask our neighbor if we can plug our phone chargers into their generator, hopefully we've been a good neighbor to them in all the large and small ways that being a good neighbor means. My friend Marta saw that after her home burnt down on Christmas Eve. Up to then, she'd been a tireless advocate for the Latinx community in Boston. And when disaster hit her community, the community she served, they rushed to support her and her family. She didn't know it until the day after the fire, but she'd been preparing for disaster all along. And that begs the question, how are we, each of us, how are we preparing for the disasters that we can't anticipate? What kind of safety nets are we creating when we interact with our neighbors and our strangers and each other right here in this congregation? I'd love to pray that disaster never touches any of us, but I think that's the wrong prayer. I pray instead that we live and love with full awareness that disaster is always a possibility, and that instead of making us clutch for greater control, this awareness brings us into greater communion with each other. This awareness brings us into greater communion with each other. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to rise and sing our closing song, number 1. May nothing evil cross this door.
sunshiny day. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Yes, I can make it now, the pain's gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is the rainbow I've been praying for. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Go around, there's nothing but blue skies. Look straight ahead, there's nothing but blue skies. Yes, I can make it now, the pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here's the rainbow I've been praying for. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Yeah, gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
May our vulnerability remind us that we need to go deeper and deeper into community. May it be so. Our worship is over, our service begins. Go in peace, gentle people.